Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining today's Live with Liz. This is a Lunch and Learn, which is a bi-weekly or bi-monthly, I should say, series that's done in conjunction with Ethan Smith's Just Ethan. So as many of you know, we're doing programming with the International OCD Foundation, where every week we're coming to you live with different content, different experts, and we are so excited for today's. So a couple housekeeping items. Please say hi. Let us know where you're joining from and who you are. You can put your comments in the comment section on the right box next to the chat area here in StreamYard. And just a couple updates. So as a friendly reminder, this is not therapy or intended to replace therapy, but instead, this is really about us bringing educational content, sharing some perspectives and some advice, but we would really encourage you to continue to see or seek out individualized treatment questions from your personal provider. If you're feeling unsafe or suicidal, please call the National Suicide Hotline, call 911, or go to your local emergency room. We have many international visitors who join our website. So of course, for you all, this is specific to the US. You would have to call your emergency hotlines that are local to you. Today, we are joined by Kim Quinlan. We're so excited to have her here. Many of you know her in so many different capacities, in particular as a big social media influencer and the owner and founder of CBT School. So Kimberley Quinlan is a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, and she's the founder of cbtschool.com. If you haven't checked it out, please check it out. It's an amazing resource with such phenomenal content and seminars, webinars, and just expert advice that she gives. It's an online psychoeducation platform that provides online courses for individuals with obsessive compulsive disorder and body-focused repetitive disorders who don't often have access to mental health care. Kimberley is also the host of Your Anxiety Toolkit podcast, which many of you have seen. She posts about and just does wonderful podcasts. I know, Kim, I loved the ones that you did with talking about like Khloe Kardashian's So OCD, and I think you've just done such an amazing job, not just at providing mindfulness-based tools for anxiety, OCD, depression, and BFRBs, but really for helping us start to break down the stigma and stereotypes that exist around mental health conditions. Here at IOCDF, and I know myself, right, that's really the core of what most of us do. While we love to provide direct treatment and we love to make an individual difference, I think we all share in the goal and hope that the content we produce or the content that we share will break down some of those barriers, because we know that stigma is just so big and continues to be so apparent. I think we're doing better in making huge strides, but we are certainly grateful for all of your education content and stigma reducing work that you do. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Really, it is. Thank you for that beautiful intro.
Well, we mean it all. So absolutely. So we'll kind of hop in, and a lot of you might say, well, what's today about? And today is really about the holiday season and how we how we cope with stress and also still find hope in this time, right? So I think it's really important. One of the things that I know you share a lot about and that I've talked a lot about is the perceptions of how we feel like we're supposed to feel versus how we actually feel in different times in our life, right? We see new moms talk about this, where they'll talk about, you know, I was kind of told by society I was supposed to have these feelings and feel the certain way, but then it kind of surprised me and I didn't know how to deal with that. And I think that's no different around the holiday season, where it's supposed to be full of cheer and joy, but it's not what everybody expects. And so we would love to hear a little bit, just to kind of start off, of what advice you give individuals when there's a way where we feel like we're supposed to feel, but we're really not feeling that. Like our emotions don't match up to what society tells us we should be feeling.
Right. Well, you know, as much as COVID has been such a stressful year, I really loved having conversations with people about how COVID kind of gives us permission to not be perfect this year, right? Like, you know, and I think that that's a really, as much as COVID is so painful and stressful and it brings so much suffering, I sort of want us to use this opportunity to let go of all these perceived ideas of what we should be doing and just sort of settle in. I think that for myself, I will speak, is I think that for anxious people, they tend to have a great deal of hyper responsibility, that they feel like it's their job to make Christmas great for others. And that they're not allowed to, like, quote unquote, ruin other people's Christmas. And I want to sort of, again, give people permission to show up as yourself this year, right? Like you really settle into the messy middle here. Like, I was just talking to a friend yesterday. It's like we're making gingerbread houses, and I think it's out, my kids want it to be perfect and I want it to be perfect. And then I'm like, let's just smear a big smear across it and let's just get the imperfection out of here and over and done with. So I really want people to sort of embrace the imperfection that comes along and go back to the things they value instead of these list of shoulds.
Right. And it's interesting. I know for me personally, I feel like this year has been eye-opening in so many ways, right? There's been so many things going on that we've all learned from and grown from, I hope, and that we will continue to do. But one of the things that really opened my eyes is seeing my family members' anxiety. A lot of my family, my husband's family, I'm seeing their anxiety this year for the first time more than ever because of COVID, right? There's so much just anxiety everyone's feeling, OCD or not, right? You're feeling, am I making the right choice? Is this safe? What do we do? What do we not do? How do we navigate that? And I wonder if you've heard or kind of what you're hearing from clients and individuals about what that's like for them. Because I know for me, I never want anyone to have anxiety. I'm not saying that I would want that. However, there's been a little bit of normalcy in seeing like people being willing or feeling like they have to be a little bit vulnerable to share, where it kind of is like, okay, like I'm not the only one, right? Like, and I feel like COVID has allowed this place where we can all kind of experience messiness, and it's more accepted right now.
100%. And I think that was really apparent at the beginning of COVID. Excuse me, in that some of my clients with OCD, panic disorder, were actually shocked that they were handling it better than their family, their co-workers, their boss, and the teachers. And so that was really, really like reaffirming to them that the work they'd been doing had paid off, right? Like, oh, I've got these skills that I've been using for a while, and they actually didn't have these skills. And I think what it really brings to mind, and what I've been reflecting on and really agreeing with you, is I think that those who didn't have anxiety, they haven't really had to stare into, what it's like to carry anxiety throughout the day. And for someone with anxiety, they're often judging themselves, like something must be wrong with me. Why am I this way? And then I think for them to have other people experience it is a sense of like, oh, I'm actually stronger than I ever gave myself credit. Because look at how well I do handle it, right? Yeah, we might have struggles and we might do compulsions and we might have a panic attack. But given the comparison, I'm actually coping for a year or longer, for a whole lifetime, really, really well.
And I think, one of the things we talk a lot about that you're speaking to is for those of us that have done work, right? We might not be perfect at it. I would never say I'm an expert at leaning in or an expert at uncertainty. It's a work in progress, right? I love your quote we all love, which is, it's a great day, beautiful day to do hard things, right? We have to consciously, it's a choice. Like it still can be hard and it still can be a struggle. And I think that's really important. That's one thing that Ethan and I really try to paint is the picture of our lives and vulnerability, that like we don't have it all together. And I think sometimes, through social media, it's easy to have comparisons of like, well, look how they're doing. Why am I not there? Or, and to feel like there's this image we have to uphold, that it has, like, there's been some beauty in the fact that despite, yes, there's still social media images and all this stuff going on, in general, people have started to put down some barriers and have started to speak about struggles, even if it's not OCD.
Yeah. I agree. I share often this game I play with my daughter because I'm really cautious of the messages that she picks up from media, right? And so when we go to the mall, we'll always point out like, oh, look at that mannequin. Do you really think women's bodies should look like that? And we talk about it, right? Like you don't have to look like that and your skin doesn't have to be that color and so forth. But I think that now is another time where there's a lot of imagery going on, particularly around the holidays, of what Christmas is supposed to look like. And I just use that as an opportunity to call it out. Like, oh, you see how that table's so beautiful? Does our table need to be that beautiful? No. Like, do we need to have that smile on our face all the time? No, we really don't. Like, so it's trying to just call out how media impacts our expectations on ourselves. And I think sometimes that just normalizes like, yeah, But we don't need to be that way. That's not what real life looks like.
Yeah, and I think it normalizes that like beauty's in the middle, right? Like beauty's in the messy, and that's really what life's about. It's about us being able to figure out like how we can still find beauty, find purpose in the middle of challenge, in the middle of struggle, in the middle of chaos, versus the expectation that things have to just be great, right? Because that's not reality for most of us. So I guess that leads right into the first question, which is, what are the first steps then? So if we know that media, maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's Facebook, it doesn't really matter, or just even talking to family and friends, is increasing our expectations of how we're supposed to do, or it's making us overall feel like we're falling short. Any tips or tools around limiting time or how we can look at it with a different lens that would be useful?
Right. Well, for me, my first question is, does that work for me? Right. The biggest part that's hard for me is Pinterest, because I love Pinterest. It sucks me in, right? And it's like there's like 15 gorgeous sets of things or happy people, and they're telling you how to have a joyful Christmas, or how to have the most happy Hanukkah and so forth. And so for me, it's just stopping and going, does that work for me where I am right now? Right. Okay, there will be years where I have the space and the bandwidth to go all in with the wrapping and putting the big bows on instead of like newspaper wrapping it or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there will be years where I have the bandwidth, and then there'll be years where I don't. And so my job is first to check in with my values and ask, is this where I'm at this year? And then if you can, give yourself permission to be where you're at. Ask yourself, what is reasonable? What can I do? And that might be like how many events you go to or Zooms you attend too, right? Because I know a lot of people are moving from doing, a face-to-face holiday to doing Zoom meetings. And so it's checking and going like, what is realistic for me? What is healthy for me? What actually does work for me? And I think that is where we have to start. Because if you don't, and you're saying yes to everything, often things get a little, as you would imagine, really, really difficult to manage. So from there, I mean, I'm always going to go straight to, you have to be compassionate. You have to stop and give yourself like a big, warm place to land, because you are where you're at, right? That's the thing about COVID and this year in general is you are where you are. You can't change that. I do these little sticky notes on my bathroom mirror at the end of the day, just like, what am I reflecting? What am I thinking about? And it was interesting. My daughter came in and like put one up, and she's like, I'm doing the best I can. And I was so warmed by that, because that's compassion, right? It's like, I am where I am, and I'm just going to give myself permission for that.
Yeah, and it's critical. And I think that the comparisons and the things that happen in general because of social media, make it harder, but especially times like the holidays, when again, it's this perception of I'm supposed to feel a certain way, or even a past memory, right? Like maybe for me, holidays always meant this, and this is how I always felt, but now they're so different for safety reasons. And it feels different, but being able to accept where it is now and what it looks like now, and finding the beauty in that. Any tips for that? Like, how do you find the beauty when it feels like something's missing, when it feels like it's not what you were looking forward to or not what you would want?
Yeah, I mean, that's the theme of this year, I think, because we all had ideas of what this year was going to look like. And a lot of people didn't get that. And so for me, it's I think it's important to recognize that naturally the human psyche has a negative bias. It naturally wants to, because we are a species that has to sort of protect ourselves, and we're constantly in that mode, which is why often some of us have anxiety, is naturally we want to look at all of the bad things. And that's not because you're, a negative Nelly. That's because that's just the way biologically we look at things. Is you're always going to walk into a room and notice, the few things that aren't so good. And so what I try and encourage people to do is not to make everything positive, because that's not realistic either, but to be able to widen the lens. Like when you're zoomed in, to zoom out and go, what does appeal to me about this situation, right? Like, for me, it will be, I am actually so glad I'm not traveling this year. Traveling is stressful. And it's easy to forget that, because you're like, but I won't get to see my family.
Right.
but to just take like, what can I do with that 12-hour flight to Australia this year? What can I do differently with that time that would nourish me, that would bring me a sense of joy, that would still make me feel connected with my values? Not, again, I want to really stress, I'm not trying to say let's make it all positive, because I don't believe in that. But I think it's important to notice that naturally we will be easily looking at what we're missing out on, but to also build strategies and build systems and routines. Like, I've had all of my patients this week create a schedule of family or holiday projects, messy ones, just to build a sense of holiday spirit, right? Not because I'm trying to distract them from their obsessions, not because I'm trying to make this all positive. It's just to know that you're building a gingerbread house on Saturday is a really healthy thing. And then to know that on Sunday you're going to deliver some cookies to somebody or make cookies. Yeah. Those things are really helpful.
Yeah. And I think I was just thinking about this as we were speaking, is, I think for a lot of us, like maybe we can't eat our family, maybe we look forward to this certain dish our mom makes and we're not going to get to have it with her, but could we still make the dish on our own? And could we make her recipe? And could we reflect on that and call her during that time when we're eating it, right? What are ways? And I think what's really important that you just talked a little bit about is making space to plan for it. Because I think a lot of us, it's easy for us to say, oh, we want this, or this is what should happen, or this would be great. But if we don't make the space, the follow through is hard.
100%. And I've, like I said, that's a huge piece. Depression is pretty big this year, right? For of course, real reasons. And some people have depressions even before COVID. And a huge part of us managing depression is to activity schedule, which is to sit down and go, okay, let's, even though things won't feel full of love and joy and all the things, that's okay. Let's just implement things that keep you above water, keep you feeling a sense of, nostalgia, warmth, compassion, a connection. It might be, like you said, cooking something that a family member has done. Or, an example would be recently, I don't know if you know this, but I traveled home to Australia to see my grandmother who wasn't doing well. And in Australia, they have a 2-week mandatory police guarded quarantine. So you go into a hotel and they shut the door and you're in. You can't get out. And that's heavy and it was hard. But my family gave me like little challenges, right? Like find, so if you can maybe even find small challenges, like, find a movie that of the theme of quarantine, or find the perfect song to match your experience of 2020, you know what I mean? So even if it's just little challenges, is a helpful way to just keep you, feeling connected.
Totally. And we're going to do our best to post some of these tips throughout today so that those of you who want can jot them down. And our first tip is just that, right? It's really about scheduling, and it's about having an activity schedule, because it leads straight into our first question, which is, how do you cope if you are more isolated this holiday season? This season, there is more depression than normal, right? We know that. It's important we talk about it. We've seen rates increase for suicide, rates increase for mental health struggles, rates increase for depression. And I think it's really important that we can give some take-home tools. So obviously that's our first one, activity schedule. But what is some of the best feedback you have for those that do struggle with depression? They are struggling with depression actively, and they kind of have to stay more isolated for safety reasons, right? Typically, isolation is what we don't want when you're depressed. And so the world's kind of forcing it.
Right. Well, I'm always going to answer with the same question. So forgive me for being really repetitive, but I believe every plan has to start with a warm, safe place to feel your feelings, right? So to be very aware of the self-criticism that happens in this full space of your brain, right? Now, it's not the specific, treatment for depression, but I really believe, look at the situation. We're in an incredibly difficult time, and there's nothing we can do about that. But what we do and what we can do is just maybe peel a little bit of the self-criticism that we give towards ourselves. Just be an observer or be aware of like, oh, ouch, what I've been saying to myself is really quite mean or harsh. And can I soften the edges around that criticism, especially during the holidays? Can I give myself some slack this Christmas? Can I offer myself up some peace? You know, like your peace of mind was a lot about, you know, giving yourself the compassion that you deserve, right? You deserve it. There's nothing you can say that will change my mind. You deserve to live in a brain and a mind that doesn't criticize and beat yourself up.
Yeah, I always say to my patients, right? Well, what would you say when if your friend's feeling this way, what would you say to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's always
Absolutely.
the way we talk to other people is so much lighter and kinder than the way we speak to ourselves. And so
Right.
how can we really shift the language, because it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And then the other thing is connect, right? Reach out to others who are like-minded than you. So if you're, you know, and then this is where I sort of like to have more than one egg in one basket, right? Is, you know, have a friend who you connect with in respect to the fact that you're not seeing your family. Who else do you know who is in the same boat? Because you know very well they're going to need to talk about it too, right? Talk to someone who's also missing out on their first year of college this year, if that's your situation. Find someone else who's in that same boat and reach out. Just send them a text and say, how you doing with that, right? If you've got someone, you know, you're really missing your Jewish services or your Christian services or whatever religion, reach out to someone in your you know, community who's like-minded, who's also struggling, because they're going to feel so happy that they're not alone. By you reaching out, and it'll also help you feel more connected.
Totally. And, you know, that was actually going to be one of my next points, is that for me, so much of my work and so much of what I do, and Michael Janicki and I talk about this a lot, is I really feel like the final piece for me and a lot of my understanding and accepting my mental health condition was to give back, right? Was to find purpose in it. And I always, people hear me say all the time, like turning our pain into purpose and how critical it is. And that purpose, I think sometimes we think it has to be monumental. It has to be, and it doesn't, right? And for me, I know growing up, the holidays were also about doing for others, right? That's my family was one of our traditions, whether it was feeding the homeless or doing different things, or the angel tree at church, or whatever you did to give back. And I think it's really important that if that fills you up, and always has been, there's ways to do it. It just looks different. Right. But I think what you just said, reaching out to others and speaking with others who are in a similar boat, maybe together you guys activity plan or schedule plan, and you think of things that you can do safely, but now you're holding each other accountable. That will feel so meaningful and purposeful.
100%. And I think and again, I love these ideas. I think the thing like you've said, and I just want to really, you know, repeat is, you know, I was watching on social media this family that were like putting these huge gift baskets together and driving them around and giving them to families. And I was just like, wow, I want to be that. But that's where I'm saying I came back to, like, check in with yourself, Kimberly. You don't have the space for that right now.
Right.
You know, like, so how can I do it? How can I first give myself permission to not just jump in and go up here, but where am I? What could I do? If it's just a call or a text, that's fine. If it's a letter in the mail, that's great. If it's donating money, you know, give yourself permission to be where you're at and to give what you can give. I think is really important there, because, you know, this is a nutty year. You know, there will be years where you can go crazy with the gift baskets, and other years you won't be able to.
Yeah, I think holidays are always hard enough when you're dealing with mental health, but this year it's a whole new level. So let's jump into talking a little bit about kids and giving some advice for parents and adults. So we know that school breaks are often anxiety provoking for different reasons, right? It's a change in the kiddos' schedules. It's transition that parents and kids have to both deal with. But this year in particular, school's been a mess, right? Some have stayed virtual the whole time. Some have gone back and forth. Some of them are not going back in person. They're staying virtual. How can we give advice to both adolescents and college-age kids about how they can still find pleasure and joy in this kind of bizarre school year? And also, what can parents do to best support and enable that?
Right. Yeah, I get it. My kids have been homeschooled all year, so we're almost hitting a year right now. So this is it's just blowing my mind. Again, I think the thing for children and adults is we just need some kind of routine. Nothing big, but some kind of routine so that there is a sense of a feeling and experience of control. Children, often need for their own, not because of OCD or their anxiety, but generally just need to have a sense of we understand what's going to happen. And so as a parent, my husband and I have just done the best we can. It's not perfect, to just give them some rhythm. They know that Tuesday is tutoring day, and they know that Friday is movie night, and just little tiny systems. They shouldn't cost you tons of money, and they shouldn't tax you. And it's not something I would encourage any parent to have an additional thing they have to do each week. It should be just little small tokens of excitement that they could do, especially during the holidays. I would actually just keep that. I mean, when we went through summer, we actually kept the school schedule. Not to say that we were teaching them during the day, but we knew that from this time to this time, this was going to happen, and lunch was at this time. Not that we want to be super, rigid about that, but I do think it helps with kids, particularly who have anxiety, just to have a general sense of knowing what's going on. I mean, that being said, I also want to really even contradict myself it's also okay if you do none of that.
Right.
Because we're very lucky. My husband hasn't been working, so he can take care of the kids, but a lot of parents are working, both parents full time. So give yourself tons of permission to not have things be perfect. For the children, I'm curious to know your thoughts on this, but I'm really trying to help them to feel like they're a part of this community and my family. Like, we, above our door, we have a little sign. It's actually quite large, and it says Team Quinlan. Because that's it. Yeah, and we had it made, and it's wood, and it's engraved, and so forth. And the reason we have that is I really want my kids to feel like it's just not mommy and daddy who go to the work. They're a part of the team. So really having them feel like they're really helpful in doing the laundry, and they get a ton of, of satisfaction out of knowing
Absolutely.
that they're helping. And I think parents these days feel like they're supposed, because of how stressful it is, we're supposed to take away every piece of their pain. And I actually try not to do that. I try to give them space to have their pain and include them in the solutions, which is like, we're going to pull in together, we're going to work together. And that's been a big part for us.
I think it's critical, and I think it's interesting because if we think back to ERP and we kind of look at how is ERP the most successful, right? Well, it's not successful if it's a surprise and we're just forcing it or pushing it, and the patients don't have an understanding of what's coming, right? Patients need to know, they need to be prepared, they need to be willing. I always say, like, exposure should never be a surprise. They should also never be planned without the patient, right? It shouldn't be that I'm going to tell you what to do. You have to have ownership. You have to buy into it. You have to agree that it makes sense. And I think it's those same tools, right, can be applied across the board, that, children and kids, they need to feel like they're a part of the team. They need to feel like they have a say in the decisions, and they need to be in the know, right? Now, that doesn't mean we don't also teach flexibility, and it doesn't mean we don't, sometimes schedules get disrupted, stuff in life happens. But for the most part, the more, especially for kids with anxiety, we can have consistency, stability, and allow them to have a clear voice, that's going to set us up for much better success than opposite.
Yeah, agreed, 100%.
So next question is, how does the whole family do self-care? We've talked a little bit about how patients with OCD and anxiety can try to encourage some self-compassion, how we can speak to ourselves. But how do we engage in self-care as a family? I think sometimes one of the things I hear all the time is, I don't have time for self-care, because sometimes we think self-care means 6 hours where we're just like meditating, going to the spa and doing all these things. And it's like, I don't have time or money. And that's not what self-care is, right? Doesn't mean it can't be. Sure, if that works out on occasion, that's great. But how can self-care be something that everyone's participating in, and what can it look like? I also think it'd be really important for us to talk about how self-care actually should be messy, right? It doesn't have to be this perfect picture.
Right. Yeah. I'm a big advocate for affordable self-care. I think that our society has painted self-care as luxurious, that they are synonymous, but I actually don't agree with that at all. I think that it can be, going to the spa can be a form of self-care. In fact, miss going and getting a massage so much since COVID. But what I've actually realized is that that wasn't actually so effective anyway in hindsight, because of, yes, I would have this one peaceful hour, but if when you come home your life is chaos, that's where we need to put the effort in. So for me, I always start with basics, right? Like I will always say basic self-care, really just first start with like, and sorry for like, I always say like, are you pooping? Like that's self-care number one, whether you are or not. I mean, I have no expectations of that, but a lot of people, the best form of self-care I say is like, don't hold your pee. Like that sounds crazy, but I think that
Take a moment. Yeah.
is that small. That's where I would start, is don't hold your pee, go to the bathroom every day, and then we work up to like, make sure you're fed, right? Make sure, you start right at those basic needs. Because I think sometimes we go, oh, I should do self-care, I should start meditating. When it's like, well, no, you're still holding your pee. Let's work there first. So sorry, that's just the way that I work. But in terms of self-care, I think that I think it's completely shifting your idea of what self-care is. It's not tranquility. It's finding small systems in your life that fill up your cup, right? That or work at not expending your energy as much as they do, looking at systems that aren't working for you. And it shouldn't be expensive, right? I really don't like the idea of self-care being expensive. I would love for, exercise to be a dance party with your kids, right? Like it doesn't have to be on an expensive treadmill for 30 minutes with with your awesome drink bottle. It could be a plastic cup and, 2 dances that you do. And I would break them up, like I would say do 2 dances in the morning and then a slow stroll in the afternoon. So I really want to just take away this idea that they have to be like scheduled and looking really great, and for it to be messy, right? For it to be, not Pinterest worthy.
Yeah, and I think the piece I'm hearing too is like self-care doesn't have to be this chunk of time, right? Or this like specific thing. It can be something simple. I know for me, a coworker, Callie, and myself were saying yesterday, like not bringing lunch to work has actually become a form of self-care because it's made us leave the campus for 5 or 10 minutes when we bring our own, we eat through lunch, we don't take a minute and we don't slow down. And sometimes it could just be that I leave it in the car, right? But it makes me go to the car, get my lunch, and sometimes I might choose to sit outside and eat, or, go say hi to a coworker before I eat lunch. Obviously, you can't really eat together because of COVID, but it's, I think this assumption is like self-care. I have to have this money, I have to have these funds, and I have to have all this time, that it's just impossible when it can be 2 minutes, right? It can be basic body function, but it also can be a team, right? Yeah. Even if you and your kids are struggling, like it doesn't mean you can't find self-care together, right? It doesn't have to be in isolation.
Right. Right. And the other thing I would add is, for one of the biggest self-care things I do is to actually catch when I'm holding my breath. Like that is such a huge piece for me. And I'll even share with my patients is like, okay, I'm going to just share with you, I'm holding my breath. I'm wondering if you are too. I wonder if we could take one breath, and that could be our piece of self-care, just to like, not that we're trying to get anxiety to go away, but just to not be holding all of the tension in our body. So yeah, I think it can be small little details that you just slide into the day, or like you said, like really having a system where it kind of brings you out into nature, which I personally think being outside is critical. The best self-care.
Totally agree. And I think especially in a COVID world, right? There's not many safe things we can do, but nature is safe as long as we can keep, of course, distance, but it allows us to kind of just transition, right? I think a lot of people are working from home, and I feel lucky enough that our residential reopened, and we are so grateful because it's just something so nice about having, of course, safe, but interactions. But for those who don't get that, and you're Zoom all day and you're working from home, right? How can you change things up? How can you switch the environment? And I think it's really about all of us committing to listening to ourselves. Yeah. One thing I can tell you right now is like, I feel how starving I am. And like, I just think to myself, like, why do you do this? Like, why do you wait to like eat when you're starving versus actually making time for it and taking care of yourself in advance, And so what are the little things we can do that actually will increase the burden overall? Because sometimes we put it off thinking we don't have time, but it actually just, takes away more time. Yeah. So I think a final question that really what this is all about is how for those who are really struggling right now with OCD, depression, and mental health, how can they get kind of out of their mind and into their life this holiday season? So we've given some great tips, we've given some great tools, but overall, right, when you're feeling isolated and you're feeling down, what are some of the most important things that an individual can do to help pull themselves out?
Yeah. Well, I think just to bounce off of your last question, the question of self-compassion, right? If self-compassion had a question, the question would be, what do I need? Right? It's the most self-compassionate question anyone can ask themselves or another person if you want to be compassionate towards somebody else. And I think that is the answer to your question. Is it will be different for everybody. And it's important to first know, what is it that I need right now? I think because it's going to be so different. And my answer is going to be to check in with what you value, right? To really check in with what's important to you. What are the things, like if you look back and you think about your most fondest memories of the holiday, what comes up for you? Is it the church service? Is it the lighting of the candles? Is it the Christmas tree decorating? Like, what is it? Is it the donating time? What is it? And then that inventory will help you to know what your values are, what is right for you, because it's going to be different for every person. And then once you've identified that, it won't look the same this year, but to try and then use that as knowledge to help you find what you could or couldn't do, right? If it's a church service, lots of church services are on the internet, still get dressed up in your Sunday best for that church service. If that's what you're used to doing, try to replicate those as best as you can. I think it's going to be really different, but I think that the most important thing here is drop the list is going to be my biggest, plea for everybody. Is Christmas and the holidays in general, and the summer winter break is about these lists and these ideas of what we thought we should be doing. We should be traveling. We should give hundreds of gifts. We should. And I think that the job is to drop those lists and first just ask, what is it that you need right now? And that's okay. It can be, I need to, totally chill out and rest for a week. You know what I mean? So I'm curious to hear what your thoughts on that.
Sorry, I'm typing so we can post these at the same time and not everyone doesn't hear my keyboard clicks. I think it's critical. I think I just love the first point that you just brought up, which is really what's missing, right? And we can say, well, everything, right? But if we really take a step back, what are the things that make us smile the most? I told my husband, I said, I've never missed a Christmas Eve service, I don't think, in my life, right? And like, I feel that right now, like that's something that, and so how can we recreate it or make sure we still get it in some sort of meaningful way that's safe this year? And there's a way, right? Will it look different? Yes. Will something maybe still feel missing? Maybe a little bit, but can I find the joy in the new 2020 Christmas, right? Or 2020 service that I might attend? And so what are those things for you that you feel like are really missing, or that you can identify, like, this is what the holidays meant to me, right? This is what reminds me of the holidays, and find a way to recreate it. And then I love your second piece. I think dropping the list, us giving room for the messy. I think sometimes I loved your gingerbread example that you started with, and I want to go back to that, because I think sometimes just intentionally messing something up. It's like, we've already gotten this out of the way now. Like now we can be relaxed, right? We let the perfectionism go. So whether it's, oh, I didn't get the perfect gift for so-and-so this year because of capacity, like that, who cares, right? That's okay. And identify that and accept that and move on versus feeling this pressure that I still have to do it. We actually talked about that. I talked about that in group this morning with my patients as we were talking about relapse prevention, and we were talking about how, OCD, anxiety, anything in life, it's no different than when you were a kid and you had schoolwork to do and you would come home and you'd put it off and your mom would say, well, like when you finish your homework, you can go play. And usually 2 hours later after a fight, we do our homework, we go play. And the response was often the same, right? Well, if you would have done it earlier, you would have got a lot more time to play. And I think sometimes we hold on to these expectations or to these things that we might not even be able to fulfill versus letting them go. And when we hold on to them, they just weigh us down, right? So what are some things this holiday season, some previous norms, some previous stressors that you can let go? And maybe letting go means you also tell that person you're letting it go, that, hey, for me this year, I'm not doing gifts. For me this year, I don't, right? And let it be. And I think that's really important. And then the third thing that I think is a really important piece of advice that I've gotten from you and others on social media to really think about is, what boundaries do we need to set for ourselves? And I think so many times, I actually used to have this as the screensaver on my phone. And when I was really struggling with boundary setting with clients, I would feel really guilty and it would just weigh on me. And I remember my clinician saying to me, Liz, boundaries are actually the way you help people, right? Not setting them doesn't actually help. It doesn't teach. It doesn't do anything except increase their expectation of you, your expectation of yourself, and causes this expectation and level of like benchmark that you probably can't keep meeting, right? You're going to fall short at some point. And so I think it's really important we think about what fills us up and what are the things that drain us, and how can we let go of some of those draining things, right? The things that pull at us, that are difficult for us. What can you do this holiday season to let go of some of that and to say no when you need to, and instead to say yes to the things that will fill you up, that will be meaningful, because I think that's going to be critical for everyone.
Right. No, I agree. I agree so much. It's funny because I have a friend who always has a theme for the holidays. Like she'll have like a taco theme, and then she'll have another theme. And I think she was saying like, I think this theme's going to be like sweatpants. Like, let's just have a sweatpants theme holiday season. And think about it, you might never get this opportunity again to literally sweatpants your way through the holidays. So whatever theme, like if it's like, your theme is like the do nothing holiday, or the, sweatpants holiday, or the, let everybody down holiday. I think that's a great way of sort of just fully, rapidly, radically accepting an idea of just going, let's just say no to everything and create a theme that feels fun and silly.
I love it.
It's a sweatpants holiday. That's what it's going to be this year.
Yeah, or I think about so many families that they do the Christmas pajamas, but like we have to change out of them and get ready. Well, why do we have to change out of them this year, right? Can they just be what we stay in all day?
Exactly.
I love that. I love the theme. And I think our big take home for today is that happiness, joy is actually in the messy, right? It's not in the perfection. And so many times we are so caught up with making things right, making things perfect, making sure that we have, the right solution, the right answer, or that this, and guess what? It almost never goes right? It almost never goes perfectly, but no one notices. And the messy is where beauty actually is, right? That is where memories actually happen. And ones we remember. And so I think it's really important that we keep that in mind always.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And I know we got some OCD questions. I'll encourage you to submit those to iocdf.org so that we can answer those on our next Lunch and Learn, or Ethan can answer them at his next Just Ethan. Again, we'll focus on our specific OCD treatments and get back to that. But today we wanted to focus on tips and tools to keep your stress as minimal as possible this holiday season. Kimberley, it is always a pleasure. We are so lucky and honored to know you, call you a friend. Thank you for being here. I know so many people will take these tools to heart. You guys can watch this later. We appreciate your time and are grateful for you.
My pleasure. Thank you. Again, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks again, and we'll see everybody soon. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.